welcome to Paperback Flicks.
All right, welcome back everybody for another Paperback Flicks. I'm here with the wonderful Rae Davidson. I want to call Gordon, but whatever.
I still have it. It's still legal.
It's still there somewhere.
Right, it's my middle name now, so it works.
And then we have a guest. This is my lawfully wedded or awfully wedded, however you want to say it, husband.
You can call me contractual obligated male. That's what I am.
I'm your contractually obligated female, so it goes both ways, right?
When you asked me to join the podcast, we had a couple choices that we were thinking about. One was a book called Bloodwork by Michael Connelly, I think. It was one I read a long time ago that I turned into a movie by Clint Eastwood that I thought about would be kind of fun to do for the podcast. But then you gave me a book for Christmas, and I think that's your way of telling me I need to read more. So I was like, okay, I guess we can do this book since it's kind of a book that I know you enjoy, and I do enjoy these kind of books. So Sherlock Holmes was the one that you gave me, and I thought it'd be fun since Guy Richie has made a film of Sherlock Holmes, and a couple actually, and we can talk about that. So I chose Sherlock Holmes.
And that's great because Bloodwork's kind of boring actually as a movie. So this is probably better anyways.
It's a pretty good book though. If you haven't read it, you should check it out. It's a good book. Better book than the movie.
When you mentioned it, I didn't know that it existed or anything about it. And so I was like, okay, sure. And then when you're like, Sherlock Holmes, I'm like, yes, okay.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Yes.
I think Sherlock Holmes kind of fits your guys' podcast better anyway. You kind of, it seems like you kind of like hitting the classics, so it's a good thing that we picked this one, I think.
A little more. Yeah, we're trying to branch into different stuff, but
I like it better. So.
All right. Well, let's start by talking about the book first. Jonny, what would you like to say about the book?
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say this up front and just be kind of, full disclosure, open, honest. I didn't get all the way through it. I read the first 4 or 5 chapters, I think it was. And I did it by listening to the audiobook to and from work. And I found myself getting lost a lot of the times, not because I wasn't following what the story was, but because I kept getting distracted by how well it was written. And I was like, well, that was a good sentence. That was a good paragraph. That was a good, chapter. And then I just be like, what was that about again? And I forget the whole thing that he was talking about. So I had to kind of go back and redo it a couple times. But I was so impressed with how well it was written. I thought it was so well done. Every word was like perfectly placed, and everything was the way he puts together a set, and the way he describes the character, and the way he just tells a story, and the mysteries. It's just so well done, and it's so fun to listen to too. If you have the audiobook, I think the one I had was narrated by Derek Jacobi, who's an actor I really respect and admire, and so it was fun to listen to him do all the voices. And but I had a fun time. I'm not quite finished yet. I need to finish it. I think chapter 7 through the end, but I'll get there.
Yeah. So I also did audiobook. I did it through I think it's like Magpie or something like that, but it was Greg Wagland. I don't know who I didn't know anything else that he did, but I loved it. Like his voice and the way that he did it, like it was exactly what I would have expected. And also he did like different accents for the different dialects or whatever. And with the exception of, it was probably the worst American accent at one point. He did the American accent in there somewhere, and it was kind of awful. But everything else, I was loving it. And I started reading I think the first like little bit, and I was struggling to read it. That's why I switched to audio, because I've never actually done that before. That was my first audiobook.
Ah, congratulations. Welcome to the dark side.
Right.
Or the bright light side, whatever.
Well, it was so funny that all of a sudden it was like perfectly intelligible to me. And I was like, oh, now I kind of feel dumb that I was struggling, but I didn't go back because I would rather he read it to me. So
yeah.
I did read the first two chapters myself with the book that my wife gave me for Christmas, and I like I said, I was kind of like just getting distracted, like, oh my gosh, this is so well written. Like I kept forgetting what the story was, but yeah. So I appreciate the audiobook too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Something I've actually never read Sherlock Holmes before, so I found it very refreshing and interesting that it's written from Watson's point of view,
Mhm.
not Sherlock. So he's the narrator. He's telling us about these different exploits or different adventures he's had with Sherlock and watching his process. And I found that very entertaining and very interesting. So I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, I had read, so I guess there's the short stories and then there's also novels that are like different, because I had read The Hounds of Baskerville. And so which is funny, I read it a long time ago and I don't really remember it. And so when we were like, oh yes, we're doing Shakespeare, I'm like, oh, I've read a Shakespeare thing. And this is different. It's like it's generally the same, like murder mysteries or whatever, like the mystery, the solve it, the get the clues and discern what's real and what's fake. That's the same. But the novel, it's kind of like the difference of like a movie versus TV series, you know? The novel was all kind of this one thing or like a chain of events or whatever. Whereas the short stories were broken up in a way that, like, that's kind of the way a detective's life would be. Like he would have this one and do you remember that one, you know? So I kind of felt like it was more the way an actual private detective or police detective actually would have had his cases.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. Anything else you want to say about the book before we move on to the movie? Any particular parts that you preferred?
I definitely see what you're saying about the stories. We have the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is one that we all read, right? That's what we're talking about, because that's one that I
yeah,
read.
I did the adventures and the memoirs.
Yeah.
Okay, see, I did the memoirs, but the
We have
Adventures,
both, but and because he wasn't getting through it, we just
Mhm.
stopped with the adventures and didn't move on to the memoirs. So
okay, that's what happened. But it's very episodic, so I can see that it could be a TV show. It could be a series on Netflix or something. They could turn these into, a 1 hour long show and make it a series.
Well, and they did.
yeah,
They did? Okay.
yeah.
And I watched it because of
Benedict
course.
Cumberbatch, who we're not particularly fond of, or I'm not. Neither.
That's
So
that's why we didn't watch it.
that's why we didn't watch it. We're not fans, but we do like the Guy Richie film.
Right.
We like this Sherlock.
I watched Guy Ritchie's. I watched the Enola Holmes just because it was there.
Those are
and
fun. Those are really fun, actually.
Yeah. And it was my birthday and I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch movies all day. And I literally did.
Nice.
And then I watched the series. I love this series. It's also the guy, Watson is the Hobbit. I don't remember
Yeah.
the actor's name is, but it's him.
Yeah, he played young Bilbo in The Hobbit.
To me, it personifies these short stories excellently, because in a movie you have to start picking and choosing how you're gonna, here's 36 cases, how are you going to portray Sherlock in an hour and a half or whatever, you know what I mean? And so I liked the series because it was like the short stories versus a novel.
Yeah. I can see that.
I found myself imagining Jude Law and Robert Downey Jr. as Watson and Holmes. Did you guys have that same thing going on, or was it just me?
I feel like Jude Law was more like just Jude Law the actor, and who I know him in, like I saw him as more Sherlock. I had forgotten that the roles were reversed in the movie, and I was thinking that he was Sherlock and Robert Downey Jr. was Watson. And so when I started watching it, I was like, what? Oh, right. Like,
yeah. I definitely have to say, as far as like a duo, this is this Guy Ritchie's movie with the Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. That's probably the sexiest Holmes Watson combo we've ever seen. I remember when they were making these movies and I heard that Jude Law was going to be Watson. I was like, Watson's hot? I didn't know Watson was supposed to be hot, because it's like, but they did a good job pairing
He does
him
get married.
with Robert Downey Jr. He was able to be more of like a subdued, more like he was the straight man. Whereas in most situations, you'd be like, well, that's Jude Law. I mean, he's really attractive, but you know, they really toned down the sex appeal and made him very, you know, very chill. But it works in the movie.
We also watched like Great Mouse Detective and the Wishbone episode. I go whole hog. Like
You
I
did.
watched anything I could find. They always seem to portray Watson, like Jude Law's Watson, like kind of didn't like Sherlock Holmes. Like, you know what I mean? Like they always portray him as like this, like, oh, Sherlock, you know, like, no, you're annoying. I don't want anything to do with you. Did you guys get that in the book at all? Because I felt like it wasn't in the book. And for some reason, every adaptation has him frustrated with Sherlock.
Hmm.
I didn't get that from the book. I got that there was more respect and admiration from Watson for Holmes than anything else.
Right.
Yeah, I got more the sense that it was a give and take kind of relationship, that Watson, he doesn't have to be a part of this world, but he's fascinated by it and he likes to go along for the ride and help out. And for Sherlock, it's invaluable to have somebody there which he can converse, which he can interact, he can share his thought process with, but at the same time isn't going to like bombard him with their thoughts and their ideas. Like,
Right.
like there's one thing they said in the book that they actually did use in the movie was that, you know, when Sherlock said, "You have a great gift for silence." But in the movie, he punches him when he says this. But in the books, he's like, you know, because Watson knows when he's trying to figure something out and he just kind of sits back and lets him do his thing. You know, he accepts him. I get a sense that they're like an opposite attract kind of relationship where they may not understand each other, but they accept and appreciate each other for who they are.
Yeah, you definitely feel they have a bond. And I think that comes through in the book and in the movies.
Yeah.
But speaking of attractive Sherlock Holmes and Watsons, what about Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly?
Did you watch that one?
No.
That one's it's hilarious, but it's also like it's just so silly and over the top. But my favorite parts are when they're sort of mocking the whole like where Sherlock is like predicting what he's gonna do when he's fighting someone and how it's all gonna work out. And like in the Guy Richie movie, it all works out perfectly. But in the spoof, it's a total mess and it's hilarious. Will Ferrell is Holmes and John C. Reilly is Watson.
Well, and see, I kind of like that. Like, there's others that we've talked about that will have like we talked about To Kill a Mockingbird. There's To Kill a Mockingbird, and there's the movie of To Kill a Mockingbird, and you kind of don't touch it anymore. Like, it's kind of the pivotal film for this story, and you just don't touch it anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas Pride and Prejudice has been done something like 30 some odd times that I could find. You know what I mean? It has like inspired this whole like subgenre of Pride and Prejudice type of, you know. I feel like Sherlock Holmes is kind of like that. I feel like Sherlock Holmes is kind of another one of those that like every time I watch like, I don't know, CSI or like the crime dramas or whatever, I understand Arthur Conan Doyle was probably not the first person to be like, let's lay out some clues and see if you can figure it out. I get that. But Sherlock Holmes, like everyone knows when you're gonna Sherlock something, like, you know what I mean? Like everybody knows who that is, even if they've never read it, even if they haven't seen the movie or whatever. It has kind of inspired this entire genre of like detective or murder mystery type.
The whodunit, yeah.
I don't know if Ruth did it with us, but in junior high, we did a couple like the murder mystery dinners where we all had to come and dressed up in character, and they would with each like they would be serving appetizers, and like we had to like take our slip of paper so that we knew this much, you know.
I think we did one at Ben Blaylock's house one time.
That was Yep,
I was there for one. I do remember that.
So yeah, so all of that is in part, if not entirely, inspired by Sherlock Holmes, which is kind of cool. Like that, to become that much of an icon is kind of awesome, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a very iconic character. Like it's, and he's so well written, and so interesting, and everything about the way the story is written is so well done that it's not surprising that it became so popular.
Right.
Anyway, so should we talk more about the movie now? Anybody ready for that? Yes.
I'm ready.
What would you like to say about the movie, Jonny?
Well, it's no secret that I'm a big Guy Ritchie fan, and his style just really appeals to me. And I think he's actually the perfect director for a Sherlock Holmes movie or movies. His influence is obviously it's there. You see, the Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and the Snatch, and the Gentleman, all that kind of stuff that he's known for doing. Like you see it in Sherlock Holmes, but you don't see it. It's not overdone, and he does it. It's used sparingly. It's used at the right moments, and it's very effective. But then again, like I just think the way he put the story together, the way it just looks so perfect. I would say we watched it with our kids the other night for this podcast, and they had a good time. We had a good time. It was just a lot of fun to watch, and it's very engaging, and it keeps you interested the entire time. And I really enjoy it. So I think that's a lot to do with Guy Ritchie and his directing style. So.
Mm-hmm.
So I did listen to all of these short stories, at least from these two books. I don't know if there are more out there, but I got the feeling from the movie, it felt more like action adventure-y, which maybe was just necessary because these days we want to be entertained. And it was immensely entertaining, and it still had like he's a pugilist, and he did that. He had the boxing match. He had also, they play the Rocky Road to Dublin, which is one of my favorite songs. So that was cool. The song during that fight, I love that song. Anyway, that was a side note, but I was excited when I heard it. But like they have all the things, his like how he can kind of like in an instant break down, if I do this, blah 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 blah, the
Mm-hmm.
4D chess kind of thing,
Yeah.
and then act it out. And sure enough, and then every once in a while he's like, oh, that wasn't quite what I expected. Okay, how do I roll with that?
Right,
So
right.
I loved that they had that. But Irene Adler is in exactly one short story.
Mm-hmm.
And yet she is like, and she's not his girlfriend. She's not like, he calls her the woman because she was like the only smart woman that he ever really knew, apparently.
Yeah.
Which I can appreciate. He's not super social. But it was just funny to me that the movie was all about Irene Adler and they were in love and or whatever. I don't know. And I was just like, okay, like they kind of took that and ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Which,
Ruth, you noticed that too right away that she was in one of the short stories, but she wasn't like really a major part of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I like that they ran with that because that's how the book starts, and it talks about the woman, and it was very intriguing concept that there, was one woman that like not so much the woman that got away, but the woman that got away with it. The one
right.
that like, he didn't quite catch. And I like the idea that she comes back into his life to somewhat terrorize him later on. That like sort of like, yeah, I outdid you once. Hey, I'm here again. See if you can
Mhm.
catch me this time. Like I kind of like the idea that like they don't quite imply that they were a couple ever, but that there's a certain amount of like mutual respect for each other. And I like that. I like that they grew her character and they turned her to somebody more interesting. Also, I like that by adding that layer of her personality, making there's a little bit of a tension between them, makes Sherlock more interesting to me because I feel like one of the things they say in the book is that like he pretty much doesn't think of women at all in that way. And I'm like, that's really hard to relate to on any level, any man not having any interest at all in women at all, besides a gay man. But like even then it's like people generally want to connect with another person. And maybe because he has that relationship with Watson, he doesn't need that, but it's not relatable, and it's one of those things that makes Sherlock seem kind of wooden and like emotionless. And
Mhm.
so I like that they did that in the movie, where they kind of gave him a little more humanity by adding that little bit of a flirtation, that little bit of a feeling with Irene,
Mhm.
right?
Irene.
I want to say Eileen because of the song, but anyways, Irene, like adding that made him a little more human and more likable and just more relatable.
Hmm.
So it really works really well for the movie.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, I always thought that Moriarty was like, was he even in the movie? I don't remember
Like
Moriarty.
he's in it, but like he's like a shadowy, like a shadow
Right.
with a hat, like a face with no
Right.
face. They show him in the
Because,
second movie, but not in the first one.
right. I always understood that that was like his arch nemesis. And you guys haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but I will tell you that the reason that that is because the final, I think it's called the final problem. Yeah, the final problem. He talks about how a lot of these people that he's going after, like the hardcore bad guys, because sometimes it's just like almost a tragedy of errors. Some of these cases, he's like, all right, well, you know what? I solved it. Also, maybe just
Don't be
scoot
so
along,
stupid.
you know. But the ones that are the actual bad guys, most of them are part of this like syndicate or something, and Moriarty is the head, and he's like, the final problem is him going, I finally got him, I finally got him. And then Sherlock ends up dying, as far as we understand, in taking down Moriarty. So
Hmm.
I always thought that he was like the nemesis, but actually he is only mentioned in that one short story. He's never actually mentioned in any of these others that we read. So I was like, oh, for some reason I just always assumed that he was like the ultimate baddie. And
Mhm.
so the movie, I'm like, he's like barely even, like, he barely even registers. And actually it turns out that in the books he barely registers too. So
Yeah.
Well, is he in the series? We haven't seen the series, so is he in every episode in the series?
he's not in every episode, but he does become, for a time, he is kind of the arch nemesis of a couple of seasons or something.
Mm.
But I really like the series. So I did not know, I knew the name Benedict Cumberbatch because I thought it was funny. I thought it was a funny name, and so I remembered it because I'm like, haha, that was hilarious.
Yeah, I
But
have a hard time saying it right. I want to say Cumberbum, Pumpkin Patch, or something like that. Like we like to
yeah,
mess up
Yeah.
people's names at home, so we always say it wrong home. But when I have to talk to other people, I have to remind myself the right way to
how to
say
really say it.
names. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and so I went to a friend's house, well, our next door neighbor actually, and he was like, I've been watching this show that I think you would like. And I was like, oh yeah, like years ago. I was like, oh yeah. And so he showed me this one episode, and it made no sense. I understood it was Sherlock, and it made no sense. And it turns out that it's like because in the book, I think it's in the Irene Adler one, Watson mentions that he's like, when he's not like on the high of a case, he tends to get bored with life, and so he takes cocaine, right? And
Yeah.
so in the series, it's the same, that like he like falls into like a drug habit or whatever.
Mhm.
And he has this like drug induced dream thing where he's in like a Victorian whodunit with Moriarty, and like it seems so weird, and so like I'm like, what are we watching? And he's like, I think you'll like it. And I'm like, okay, thanks, bud. And then I never watched it again. And then when we were doing this, I was watching, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this show. So it turns out I actually love the series, and they can focus on, like I said, like in a movie you kind of have to be like, here's all of Sherlock Holmes. Let's do a little
Mhm.
bit of this. Let's grab Irene Adler because she's the only woman that ever mattered to him.
Yeah.
Let's pull in this and this, and try to create the entire story in one or two films.
Mhm.
Whereas in this series, they can just be like, what's the next case? And they modernize it. So Irene Adler, she does still have pictures, and they are still of a scandalous nature, but her blackmail is of a modern era. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like it makes sense in the modern time, because anymore, oh no, you were in the same car with a whatever
With
actress
a
or
dude. Oh
opera singer.
no. How
Yeah,
horrible.
whatever it was. Like that would no longer matter, you know.
Yeah, I just
However,
up like recently that the TV show Sherlock was a modern day and not an actual period piece.
right, which it was, once I actually started watching it, I was like, I actually really like this, and so then I had to binge it all. I'm like, but it's for the thing, the podcast, so I have to.
First, always
Well,
for the podcast.
I would wager to guess, Ruth, that you would probably like the series as well, just like Rae. You tend to like the same things. I think you would like it.
I just don't like Cumberbum. I like him as Doctor Strange, and that's like it.
I'll tell you what it is about him that I think you and I both agree on is that when Hollywood finds the next it thing, they tend to push that person like so much in your face that you just can't take it anymore. And he was in everything for like a couple years. I didn't think he was that talented. Sure, he might be a good actor, but oh my gosh, he was in everything.
See,
And
and
it was
I
just
didn't know who he was.
and I couldn't take it, and so now I avoid it. And I probably shouldn't because I might enjoy some of the things he's done, but like when I see his name, I'm like just repelled by it.
That
So
guy
that's my reason for not watching anything he's in.
See,
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was. Like I said, I had heard the name and like that's a funny name, but I still Doctor Strange and Sherlock. I legitimately cannot name a third thing that he was in.
He's in a lot of things.
Mm.
What else? So he does the voice of the Grinch in the computer animated one with Grinch movie, which I hate, by the way. I know everybody else likes it, but I really don't like it. Not just because of him. He does fine as Grinch in it. I hate the modernized version of it. I don't think it works. What else is he in? He's in
Did you hear the voice of the dragon in the Hobbit movies or something like that?
Oh,
might have been. I know he voiced a few things. He was in Zoolander 2. I know he was in more stuff, like, but now you ask him something to be like,
yeah,
That
no.
World War II movie about some I forget what that one's called, but he's in that World War II movie. We'll look it up.
Yeah.
Okay, so he played Khan in the remake of the Star Trek movies. He played the Khan character, which I didn't think he worked for at all.
I kind of want to say this too. I don't like his face. I'll just say that right now. I don't like his face. So his name and his face bother the crap out of me. So there's that.
Not working.
So, you know, when there's a girl that like she's really cool and she's really whatever fun and whatever, and maybe she's like got a tight little body or whatever, and they call her a butterface because she's like the perfect woman, but her face, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're saying Cumberbatch is kind of a butterface,
But his face.
but his face.
Yeah. So you might see why Johnny and I get along so well. When we don't like somebody, we really don't like them, and we're very open about it. So
We bond over not liking Julia Roberts and Meryl Streep and
yeah,
Susan
we
Sarandon.
bond over the things that we hate. For some reason, this is very positive for our relationship.
So Scott and I are almost the opposite in that he gets me to like things that I assumed I didn't like, and I have gotten him to at least feign interest in, be moderately interested in things that he didn't care about before. Do you know what I mean?
That's
So
good.
like,
Definitely.
like with all of the like he liked the Guy Richie. He couldn't tell you who Guy Richie was. When I said Guy Richie, he was like, the what? And I was like,
Just say Madonna's ex-wife.
well, I go, the Sherlock Holmes with Iron Man. And he's like, oh. So that's kind of his speed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But then when I was watching the series, he was like, and then he actually sat down and watched a couple episodes with me, and he was like, that's kind of cool. Is this story from before? And I'm like, yes, now you have to go back to the beginning and watch it from the beginning because, you know. But yeah, so we kind of do the opposite where like he's like, yay, anime, and I'm like, cartoons. He's like, shut your mouth and sit down. You know, we are going to watch it till you love it, you know? But I make him do that too. So I made him watch half of the Pride and Prejudice stuff with me. And I made him watch the musical of Matilda. And now here with Sherlock Holmes, I'm like, ooh, Wishbone does a Sherlock Holmes. I'm like YouTubing it. And he's like, Rachel. And I'm like, nope, we're gonna watch it. And you're gonna love it.
I actually liked the Matilda musical. I liked Emma Thompson as the.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting, definitely. It was well done. Anything we want to say about the movie still?
I'm checking my notes.
All right, you do that.
It's actually a surprisingly, oh, you can't see it, but it's like a surprisingly small amount of notes. Usually I have like a whole legal pad and I'm flipping through pages. But I think I've said just about everything that I was planning to say, so
Yeah. I'm glad I rewatched the movie because there was a lot of things I forgot that I didn't realize I'd forgotten. Like I'd forgotten how certain things came together and what happened here and there. So it was almost like watching it for the first time again, even though my kids love to ask, like, oh, does this happen? Or like, what happens next? I'm like, well, we have to, wait and see,
Mhm.
Even if I know what's going to happen, I try to encourage them not to do that. But I was actually like, I actually don't remember. So your guess is as good as mine. But yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. It was fun to watch, even with the kids. So like to see them get into it and to get into the banter. And
do either of you guys, when you're watching, like, especially for the first time or whatever, do you like try to figure it out and you're like, oh, she's gonna whatever? Do either of you guys do that?
Well, we just finished watching the series You and the fourth season, and I thought I had it figured out pretty early on. Turns out I didn't, but I was like so confident that I had it figured out.
we
I
were
was
both
like, I don't
wrong.
know who the killer is, and I got it wrong. But You is another one, I mean that last season anyway. That was a good example of a murder mystery who done it, and they were kind of like taking over that genre in that.
Yeah, they're kind of making fun of it at the same time. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's the writer in me is always like, oh, this means this, or they're hinting at that, or like I'll find the little moments and things, or like this is just a little clue. So I'll
Mhm.
notice those things, just the way my mind works. But yeah, it's always surprising when it doesn't go the way you think it's going to, especially when they leave you breadcrumbs to make you think that's where they're going.
Mhm.
Clearly, they were red herring crumbs. They
Yeah.
want to mislead you. So yeah.
And I tend to be very visual. And so like I like to like yes, I understand the action is going on right here, but I'm like checking out like is there something over here? Are you gonna see like a hand creep up and like steal something or whatever? Like, like I'm always like checking the periphery.
Yeah.
And the really good movies that I don't remember I don't remember if it was in any of these that I'm thinking of, but like they'll do like something over here that you're like didn't notice that, and then when they go back and they're like I noticed that, because they do that in the book all the time, right, where he's like blah 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 and this and then he's like, did you notice how close the rope was to the bed or whatever, like the sash to the bed, whatever that was, and you kind of go, wait, what? And when they take it back and they show you, because I love the visual, because maybe I didn't understand something when I was reading it or hearing it read, but then when they show me, I'm like, I know what a bell chain is. When you're showing me, it makes sense. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll take it back and they'll show when he's describing it, and you're like, oh, she did take that or whatever. Like, I don't know. I like that kind of thing
Yeah.
where it was right there and you didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think the one story like in the book where like I could see where it was going and I figured it out before it ended was the one with the missing fiance.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
That's
one
the
like
American one.
right away I was like, I think I know where this is going. I think I know who this is. And then when it turned out being right, I was like, ah, I didn't get any of the other ones, but this one I knew who it was.
Well, as far as the movie goes, Ruth, I will say that I really appreciated all the comic timing bits, all the moments with Jude
Mhm.
Law and Downey Jr.'s back and forth, and
Mhm.
just the moments that make you laugh. They were in there quite often, actually. Even though it's just like action adventure, there's a lot of moments that like make you laugh and kind of like give you that relief. And so I really appreciated all of those moments.
Downey Jr. has a way of delivering things that, like, he's kind of one of those actors that I feel like maybe has just done so much that after a while I'm like, of course he was in that, because he's in everything.
Yeah.
And not that I'm like, ugh, but I do kind of feel like film is well saturated with Robert Downey Jr., right? And so, but he has a way of delivering things that, like, if someone else said it or did it, it might not have been as funny. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just kind of go, oh, zing! Like, it is funnier depending on who's doing it.
Yeah, his delivery is really well done. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good. I particularly loved the hotel scene where, you know, he's sitting there naked behind just a pillow, and the man comes in and he's like, "Dear lady, don't be distressed, but there's a key behind this pillow."
The key to my release.
Runs. Yeah, that just cracked me up. I was like, overall, I really enjoyed the books. I thought they were fun. I would definitely read more of them. They're very entertaining, and I definitely see why people get so into this writer and this series. I think they did a pretty good job of taking what works from the book and carrying it over character-wise into the movie, but then putting their own spin on it and sort of like tweaking it. And again, like you're saying, it's more of an action adventure in the movie than it is in the book, because you know, we're moving into a visual medium, and it's modern times. We need like action packed and explosions and all this big exciting stuff. It just doesn't happen in the books, but it would have been cool in the books too, but that wasn't necessary, especially back when these books were written, to do that much. But it is now in like a movie setting. We need big and grand, and you might as well, they have millions of dollars to build these sets and to do these things. Let's go big. It's Hollywood after all. So I think they did a good job. I think it was very very well done period wise. I didn't ever get taken out of the moment and feel like I wasn't in that time period. It felt very beautifully put together and rich, and I even like Rachel McAdams as Irene. I feel like some actors and actresses are not period actors. They can't fit into other periods. And I felt like she did really well. I believed her in that era. She felt authentic to me. And I feel like, you know, Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law, they did great. They felt like they belonged. So I feel like overall, really well done.
I know who the actress is that you think doesn't fit in those type of movies. I think Cameron Diaz, right? Is that the one that you think?
I also don't like Cameron Diaz at all. So there's that too. But she's in the movie Gangs of New York.
Yeah, I think I watched that with you. And I remember both of us being like, the heck?
She does not fit. And you're like, she feels modern. Like she doesn't belong here at all. Yeah. Like you could tell the people that really feel like they belong in their characters, and then the ones you're like, this is somebody likes this person, or this is someone's girlfriend, and that's why they're in this part or something. You're like, why?
Well, and I'll say, so we've been talking about the actors and they need to fit in the time, and also they need to have a little bit of that like tongue-in-cheek, almost breaking the fourth wall. Like they need a little bit of that too. They need to be able to do the like straight-laced Victorian character while also being able to whatever jump through explosions and
kind of, you know, sarcastic in a way.
Yeah, like they need to be able to have that like almost ultra dynamic to tell this story. Do you know what I mean? Like I can think of several, especially actresses and actors, that I'm like, well, they would be perfect. You know, you think of all the actors and actresses that you have seen do period pieces, you know, but
they would be good action stars.
Yeah, like I can't imagine like, oh, who was I thinking? I forgot her name. Jennifer Pride and Prejudice.
Jennifer L, I think that's her name.
Yeah, like beautiful, perfect for the time. She was perfect for a Jane Austen type story. She would not have done well in a film like this. Right, Prejudice and Zombies, which as we know, I super loved. There's kind of a foot in both camps that all three of these main actors had enough of, that like you believe Robert Downey Jr. is a Victorian era detective and also really cheeky with things that like today we find funny, you know?
Mhm.
And is it McAdams or
Yeah.
just Adam?
McAdams.
McAdams. Like she did the pretty Victorian, she looked right. She held herself to where you're like, oh yes, I can see that and she's not just the damsel in distress. Like she's like,
You can
I'm
kick some
gonna
butt.
fight when I can fight.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like it when there are certain actors that can tell this story the way that we're trying to tell it
Hmm.
without pulling you out. So
Of the story. Yeah. Yeah. That always helps. Anything else we want to add? Do we cover it? Do we feel like we've got it? We're good?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Jonny picked the book. I picked the book for Jonny, whatever. But so it's your turn to pick the next one. Ray, do you have any idea what it is you want to do?
So I do. I want to do the boy in the striped pajamas.
Oh, I
It's
have
a little
not
bit
read that.
heavy,
Is
but
that a World War II? Is that a World War II?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's World War II. I've never seen it or read it, so that sounds interesting.
I have not read it. And I wanted to see the movie, but I just hadn't gotten to it. And my daughter actually watched it. I was called out, by the way. So my oldest daughter, Bethany, she was doing a report or something on authors. And so she was using Ruth as like she was like, oh yes, I happen to know an author, kind of. And so she actually called you her Aunt Ruth. I was like, that's right. Because we do call you Aunt Ruth around here. When we talked about your work, right? She goes, that wasn't me. That was Megan or whatever. Like she was like, I said that, not Haley or whatever it was. Like, so I got called out. Sometimes I say one child and it's a different child.
It's the curse of parenthood. It happens. Like I call them all each other's names, and sometimes I'm like, "Who are you? What's your name again?" Like
Yeah.
it's just
Well, I have a tendency to go Megan or Big Megan, meaning one of her older, like meaning an older sister or whatever. Like
that's the medium ground right there.
I will say a name and then I'll just figure out should I go up or down from there. I don't know. But anyway, so I believe it was Megan. But anyway, she's like, Mom, she has a movie club and they watch all different kinds of like historical or whatever, like interesting movies. But one of them they were talking about, or possibly that they already watched, was The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And so I was like, I like to kind of know what they're a bunch of teenagers that get together and watch movies. So
Mm.
sometimes I'm like, I would like to pre-screen this. And so where she was talking about it, I went ahead and watched it and I was like, I I have some thoughts. And so I kind of did a Google on my phone and I saw that it was based off of a book. And so I knew when I saw that, I was like, I'm going to do that for paperback flicks.
Nice. Yeah.
So I'm holding it in my back pocket.
Good job. Way to, pre-plan instead of like coming up with it at the last second, like on the podcast, like I do sometimes.
Sometimes. Oh, also, just throwing it out there, I've got a couple of authors. So we just had the Renaissance Festival. It's currently going on out here in Arizona. And
Come
so
straight from there for the podcast.
well, so I actually considered, I had my phone, I considered just doing quick little videos with the authors there, but the sound is awful and
Yeah, definitely.
you know. So we've got some authors. Also, apparently I work with one. And
Oh,
I didn't know it. Like I was saying something about, oh, because sometimes you can just listen to things while you're working. It's a print shop. And so sometimes I don't need to hear what else is going on. And so we have like headphones that we'll be listening to something. So I was listening to Sherlock and she's like, oh, what's this? And so I tell her, oh, I'm doing Sherlock for a podcast. And she's like, oh, what's your podcast? And so I was talking to her about it a little bit. And she's like, when I mentioned that, we'll talk to indie authors, she's like any kind of indie author.
like
So
be by any kind.
well, because
I don't
she
know.
does.
Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, so she does children's books as well as I believe she has a young adult line as well.
Okay.
So I've got a couple authors on the line that we'll be talking to sometime.
Yeah,
I don't
definitely.
know
We
if,
should do that sometime.
I don't know if Ruth told you, Ray, but I am an author. And I'm
Not
gonna
yet.
book-
No, not yet.
I have a book coming out. It's gonna be called Manhattan. That's the title. Pretty cool title, right? Manhattan. I like it. It's got a cool cover too. Anyway, it's going to be released in 2044, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Excellent.
He's full of crap. This is
No.
one of my book covers that I made, like a pre-made book cover to sell, that he decided he liked. And he's like, I'm gonna write a book. I'm gonna use that cover. I'm gonna write a book. And suddenly he's writing this book, but he said it's not coming out until 2044. So
2044, look for it. Manhattan by Jonny Craddock is going to be a bestseller.
We'll interview you.
There you
Surely
go.
we'll still be doing this.
you
Not
have to
be a
actually
whodunit,
publish it
though.
first.
It's not a whodunit, so
No.
So this is silly, but I don't remember what Ruth and I were talking about, but I decided for whatever reason that I was going to write a book about your family. And so I got information about like the personalities of the kids and so that I knew what I was doing.
Oh.
And I have all the notes.
Oh.
And that is all.
really.
So like
someday,
our family?
Well,
Like-
when's yours coming out?
What?
What
when
you
I
do
get to it.
Yeah, when's your book coming
Well,
out?
it turns out that I am very good at big picture. I can like I could explain what I intend the story to do. Actually writing stuff is real hard, y'all. Like that's a hard thing to do.
It is. It is. Planning it is its own thing, and then the actual writing, you're like, aha, this is gonna be great. This is gonna write itself. And you start writing, you're like, why isn't it writing itself? This was supposed to be easy. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, it's never.
So by the time I get to it, if I ever get to it, your kids are going to be grown and they're going to be like, "Thanks, Ray. That's real weird." But it'll be there. It'll
Good
exist.
is. Weird is good. We like weird. We're all for it. All right. Well, that sounds good. So next time we're gonna do
Boy in the striped pajamas.
Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Who's the author? Do you know?
I do not.
We'll find out. And again, thank you, Jonny, for coming and joining us and talking about this book with us, and for all your love and support of our podcast.
Yep, you got it.
All right.
Well, hey. So he's not just Jonny, Ruth's man, but he also has his own podcast that people could be listening to.
Yes, he should talk about his podcast.
We should.
Yeah,
Okay.
a buddy of mine, we have a podcast called NostalgiaCast, and we talk about movies that we used to watch as kids, and then watch them again as adults, and we see how they stand up, and it's kind of fun. So we're having a good time. Right now we're doing like a 90s Palooza thing, where we're talking about all these 90s films that we love, like Pulp Fiction and Big Lebowski and Fargo. So you want to check it out? We're at NostalgiaCast on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. I think we're everywhere. So. And Ruth, you are a YouTube video editor, so you get that credit.
Yeah, I do all their YouTube videos, so I'm very involved. Jonny is the funny one, the cute funny one.
Actually, the very first podcast that I listened to was NostalgiaCast. It was the Goonies one.
Oh yeah. Hey, speaking of Goonies episode, our friend David Nugent, he's going to be our guest coming up pretty soon here, and he picked Mrs. Doubtfire. So
That'll be fun.
That's awesome.
Sounds good. All right, so for Paperback Flicks, I am Ruth Craddock,
I'm Rae Davidson.
and that's Jonny over there. And we will see you next time.